Okay, that looks okay.
Okay.
Maybe move... Let me see here. I think that looks okay. That lamp over there. I mean, the lamp's kind of bright, but I think it looks fine.
Okay.
Oh, this looks worse. Well, it's hard to tell. This is the hardest part, is trying to get it set up.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I want it to look okay. I don't want it to be afterwards like, what is in the background there?
What have I done? Yeah, we've taken some pictures on a house there on Rio Vista where there's the whole counters cluttered with stuff. And when I look at the picture, you think, oh, that's really bad. All I was looking at was the subject. I wasn't looking at what was behind. That was a mistake.
I'm just really picky.
Okay, nothing wrong with that.
Like, because I kind of like the lamp in the shot by you. I don't think it, well, maybe you could move over to that way. And now you keep moving so that, now you're up higher.
I don't know how.
I know, but it looks weird. Like just in composition with the lamp.
I could be higher. This chair is at its lowest level.
I think that looks okay.
Okay.
If not, well, the next time we can
do it differently.
So I'm gonna go get a chair so I can sit more like right here.
Okay. They're folding chairs against the wall by the kitchen table. And you want me to look at you, not the camera?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think that looks really good. Okay, now that we're already recording.
You are? I don't see a red light.
It says recording.
Okay. Ah!
It's recording. There must not be a red light.
Okay, I know some of them do.
Yeah, well,
That's
recording. Okay, I thought maybe you would have noticed, but maybe it's not working, because I thought it used to be down here.
well, that's what I thought, but that's okay.
Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Okay, so, well, let me tell you. There's a button. Okay. I'm going to zoom it in a little bit. Oh, I remember I was going to...
Bernice Elizabeth Pont Nielsen.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I need to look at you.
You want to try again?
My name is Bernice Elizabeth Pont Nielsen, and I understand that I phoned somebody and they said leave a brief message, and I said I was Bernice Elizabeth Pont, and she called. That was Carolyn. She called me back. She said, "Mom, don't you even know your name?" Yeah.
That was recently?
Yesterday.
Where were you born?
I was born at 335 Patton Street in the front bedroom in Los Angeles, California.
Was that your parents' home?
Yes, my mother didn't believe in hospitals.
Were there any doctors there?
She had a doctor, but she didn't have a man doctor. She had a woman doctor in 1931. That's a little iffy because there weren't really that many as far as I know. Yes, she had a doctor and she actually had a nurse, and the nurse stayed for a week because she was flat on her back. They didn't let you get out of bed or do much of anything for a whole week. And this nurse fixed my dad breakfast before he went to work. I have no idea what things like that cost. I assume it was fairly nominal. I don't know.
Were you named after a relative or a family friend?
To my knowledge, yes. My mother's name was Olive Bernice, and her only sibling was Margaret Elizabeth. So I was named Bernice Elizabeth with both their middle names.
Have you ever had a nickname?
Many. As I was growing up, my grandparents lived next door, and I was called Scissors because my brothers didn't really call me Bernice a lot. They called me sister. Only my younger brother couldn't say sister, so I was Scissors. And then in school, yes, I had many nicknames. Some of them we won't go into.
Okay. Did your parents tell any funny or embarrassing baby stories about you?
The one I can remember, and I assume it's at a time when I was in diapers, she would get me bathed and all dressed up and clean and sitting on the front porch on the steps, and then she had to start over. It's the only one I remember.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I can tell you more what I didn't want to be. I never wanted to be a nurse or a teacher or anything. I was thinking more of things outdoors. When I was in high school, they give you there's a name for it. It's a test of things that you would be interested in. Anyway, I took that and they decided in counseling me that I needed to be a forest ranger, which sounded good to me. But other than that, I guess I wanted to be a cowboy or something like that. I wasn't real feminine as growing up.
Okay, we're going to talk about your parents now and the rest of your family, and then grandparents and other relatives that you remember, and then we'll go into your childhood a little bit more.
Okay, my dad was Ernest William Pond. He was born in Rio, Illinois, and then grew up in Galesburg, and then came to California and met my mother, Olive Bernice Tremblay, and they got married. And I have an older brother. He was born about 2 years before I was. His name was Glenn William. And then I had a younger brother that was born about 16 months after I was born, and he was Walter Irving, and we used to have a bad time about the name Irving. No, that's terrible. Sorry. Anyway, I think I read on a genealogy chart that one of my dad's brothers' middle name was Irving. Other than that, I don't have a clue. And my grandfather's name, of course, was Glenn, and so the first boy was named after my grandfather. That was it as far as just our little family.
Where did your parents meet?
The story is that when my dad came to California from Illinois, he put in his application at the police department, the fire department, and the Pacific Electric Railway, which ran the red streetcars in Los Angeles. And the Pacific Electric was the first one that called him back. So he drove a streetcar, and my mom would take the streetcar to work, and she and a friend, I guess my mom liked to talk to my dad, and anyway, they would always wait for dad's streetcar, and I think my mom was somewhat shy, and I know my dad was, but he finally got up the courage and asked her for a date, and she said, well, you'll have to come home and meet my parents. I figured that would discourage him. But it didn't. He came home and met her parents, and her dad didn't like him. He was, number one, had not been properly introduced, and number two, he was a Swede, and number three, he was a Mormon, and that pretty well was 3 strikes against him. But they managed to overcome the 3 strikes.
How old were they?
Well, my dad is 8 years older than my mother, and I think she was 18, which would have made him about 28. which is the same age my husband was when I married. I was older than 18, but Dick was 28 when I got married.
Okay. Where did they get married?
Um, my my grandmother and grandfather lived next door, and my grandmother had a sister who was my Aunt Tessie, great aunt actually, and they were married at her house down near the LA River. And I think it was on Thanksgiving of that year, so it was in November. So it was at her house.
So that, how long did they know each other before they got
I
married?
don't have a clue. I really have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know.
What is the most vivid image of your mom growing up?
Um, I don't know. She just was sort of always there. There was a time when I was in elementary school when both my parents worked. I just, I guess in the kitchen. She taught me how to cook at a fairly reasonably early age, and I think it was partly because when she was working, then it was my job to start dinner, and and besides, I like cooking, so I guess I remember more in the kitchen than anything else.
Were there other things that you did together that she taught you?
As time went on, my grandmother, again, who lived next door, when she needed to support herself before she got married, was a seamstress, and that's where everything was done pretty much by hand. And she made these fancy blouses with the tucks and this sort of stuff. But she never taught my mom how to sew. And so as time went on, we had an old treadle machine, and my mom and I worked together trying to figure out patterns and the instructions. And the patterns aren't like they are now. They're the same kind of paper, only thinner, and they only have holes on them. A big hole means this, and a little teeny hole means that. There's no printing on them, nothing. And directions weren't nearly as easy as they are now. But that was in a time where you didn't have zippers in the back of the dress, you had a zipper in the side, so that the skirt part would be sewed on, and then you'd have the zippers so that you could actually get in and out of it. Only you didn't know how to put in zippers, so you make the waist a little bit bigger so it slips on over your head. But I remember sewing together.
What is the most vivid image of your father?
In his uniform. My dad really looked good in a uniform, and of course he wore a uniform when he was a motorman and a conductor, or just a conductor, depended on what run he had. And he had a really nice mustache and big smile, and my dad was very soft-spoken, never yelled at us or anything, and I can just picture him when he had this one particular run, and we would walk over to the end of it, and he'd have to wait there, and then this was a small street car, and there was no place to turn around, just got to the end of Echo Park Avenue, and he had to sit there for X amount of time, and there was a little grocery store, and maybe he'd eat his lunch, and we'd go over there, my brothers and I, and then what you do is you would walk through the streetcar, and you would grab the handles on the seats, and you would pull the seats back, so that now the seats face the other direction. It was crazy. And I just can really picture him there in his uniform, his big smile, waiting for us to come and help him with the streetcar. I should have a picture at this time and show you a picture of him. I have a couple of nice pictures of him. I always hated it when he shaved off his mustache. I thought he really looked good.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of anything else about your... Oh, where was your mom born?
She was born in Los Angeles, and her mother was also born in California. And I only knew my mom's parents. I met my dad's mother once when I was a teenager. She came out to California from Illinois, and I never met his dad, and we really didn't have a whole lot of correspondence. And that was at a time where you didn't telephone somebody. If you wanted to know something, you wrote them a letter and then sat and waited for the letter to come back. So I lose my train of thought. Let's see, what was I going to say? It's gone. Did I just have a senior moment?
Okay, where was your father born?
My father was born in Illinois. And we go back in the family, and both his parents were eventually trace all their lines to Sweden. I think it was either his mother or his grandmother that was born, I think, on the boat coming over to the United States. It's a funny family story, but my older brother now says it's not true. But the family name was supposed to be Janssen, and they all moved there to Illinois, and their mail was getting all confused, and so he'd met a French sailor on the ship coming over whose last name was Pont, P-O-N-T, which means bridge. And so he changed the family name to Pont. But now my older brother Glenn says that's not true. But it sounds great, so it's true as far as I'm concerned.
What are some of the most valuable lessons your parents taught you?
Valuable lessons. The necessity of being honest, I think they both, and being willing to work for what you want.
Was there a specific time where that you can remember that they really taught you that?
I think it more rubbed off than anything. We weren't members of the church at the time, and so my parents always played with us. We always played games. We learned card games. We used to, one of our most fun games was pick-up sticks. You're familiar with that, where you throw them out and you try it. Well, we had a new way of playing it. We would turn off all the lights in the living room, and my mother would hold them, and she would throw them up in the air in the dark, and then we would fumble around in the dark trying to find them, and after a period of time when nobody could find anymore, then we'd turn the lights on, and the guy who had the most was the winner. The trouble is after you turn on the lights, oh look, it's up in the lace curtain, or it's over here, it's over there. We thought that was hilarious. We loved that. And I think in game playing, you learn you have to be honest, you have to be a good sport, because my younger brother was not much of that. And nobody wants to play with you when you can't be honest and forthright.
Well, I guess you already answered this question. Um, what other things do you remember about spending time with your family? What things did you do together as a family?
Okay, well, I should tell you the story about my mom. My mom was a Methodist, and my dad was, of course, a Latter-day Saint. And so my mom, I don't know if she'd even heard of the Mormons. Anyway, so they decided when they got married that it wouldn't be fair just to go to my mom's church or fair just to go to my dad's church. So they decided that one Sunday they would go to his church and one Sunday they would go to her church. Well, if you can imagine that, here's a newly married couple. It takes quite a while to get to where the ward is. They have to change streetcars several times because we didn't have a car until I was about 18 probably. And nobody says any word to them. And then the next Sunday they go to my mom's church where my mom has gone for years, and everybody, oh, it's so wonderful to see you, and all this sort of stuff. And I have no idea how long that went on, but it got to a point where one Sunday when they went to my dad's church, there was no one there and the building was locked. It was probably state conference, and they just didn't have a clue. And so my mom said, if this is a Mormon church, you can have it. So we were raised as Methodists. Though we were contacted eventually by stake missionaries, but it was an interesting situation.
When did you when were you baptized?
I was 13. It was August 1945.
What were the events that led up to that?
With having my grandparents next door, I remember the day my grandfather died. I'd come home from school and my grandmother was almost in hysterics. My mom and dad were both at work. And it was always our custom that when we came home from school, we had to report in next door to my grandparents. And my grandmother is running around and she yelled at me to go get our neighbor next door on the other side. And so I did. And came back. I mean, we didn't have a clue as to where, children aren't supposed to know anything. I think that was the one thing that I wasn't all that happy when I met my dad's mother. She didn't care two hoots about us kids. She spent all the time with my grandmother, who was living with us. We were in a different house then. Anyway, so then he died, and my grandmother decided she couldn't live alone anymore. So we moved in and rented our house. And then after a period of time, that was not a really happy situation. So we moved back into our house. Then my grandmother said, I can't live there anymore. And so we sold both those houses and bought a different house. I don't know how far away, 5, 10 miles, whatever. Anyway, during the time we were there, the stake missionaries evidently tracked it out the street and started talking to my grandmother. And that's a good time, I guess, to hit people because there's been a bereavement and, they're thinking about eternal things. And I guess they met with my mom or something, and nothing much. I don't remember them inviting us to church, and they never did give us a Book of Mormon. And my dad didn't have one. He had 2 books that he brought from Illinois with him, but neither of them one was Discourse of Brigham Young, and the other was Songs of Zion, a Sunday school songbook, which I still have one, and my brother had the Discourses of Brigham Young. Anyway, so we sold both the houses and we moved, and we never told the missionaries where we were going, or they just didn't come around that much. But lo and behold, through unusual circumstances, they found us. I mean, we lived up a really steep hill, and a lot of people never drove up that hill because it was so steep. Anyway, so that's how we moved from where we had lived on Patton Street up to North Alvarado. And they invited us to come to church, and so we had to walk down this very steep hill and catch a little bus that ran on Sundays and would drop us off, and then we had to walk the rest of the way to church. And the first Sunday before your time, but we used to have Sunday school in the morning, and we would have the sacrament, and then you go home, and then you come back late afternoon or early evening and have sacrament meeting and have the sacrament again. Well, as far as Sunday school, you had what was called the sacrament jam. Somebody would get up and they would, you'd sing the sacrament hymn, then you would read this little verse, and then you would have the sacrament. The first Sunday we were there, all three, both my brothers and I were in the same Sunday school class, and everything was new and different, and we didn't know what was going on. And so I guess somebody from the Sunday school comes in and says, listen, we need somebody next week to do the sacrament jam. I mean, I didn't even remember what it was. And so I said, well, how about you? And I was so shy. There's no way I could have done that. Anyways, no. And so as soon as we got home, my brother said, hey, they asked her to do this, and she said no. And my mom said, you should never say no. You should always say yes. It's another thing I guess she instilled in me. But I faked her out a couple of times. I've said no a couple of times. Not too much. But anyway, that was our first introduction to the church. And I sang in the Methodist church. By then, all three of us played the violin, and so we did musical things at the Methodist church. And I was sang in the choir. I mean, I'm just a kid, but I couldn't play the violin unless I had a pretty good pitch, and so I remember singing the hymns, and it was Before Thee, Lord, I Bow My Head. You know that one, Before Thee, Lord. And the men sing, la da da da, I bow my head, da da. Well, it's
yeah.
Okay, it's in the hymn book. That was hey, that was really great. Had a nice alto part in the whole bit, and so I'm belting it out, and the lady in front of me turned around and told me what a nice voice I had. Here I'm 12 years old. I thought that was really neat. Of course, I have to tell you, I've had somebody else tell me, and that was President Faust's wife when we were on our mission in Relief Society. I'm still belting them out. I had a voice then, I don't anymore. And twice on different occasions she turned around and told me what a nice voice I had. And I thought, ooh. Yeah, he was only on the Council of 12 then. He wasn't in the presidency. That was nice. That was very nice.
Let's go back to your parents for a minute.
Okay.
When did your father die?
I think it was 1976. He had gotten to the point, there was only one man, I think, who was a motorman and conductor who had more seniority than he did in the company. And he'd had the same, they call it a run. It's a run. It's the streetcar and you go to a certain place and stop in certain
like
places, and it's, yes, okay, same thing. Well, they would put them up for bid periodically. I don't remember how frequently, and you would have to bid on them. Well, the man who had more seniority, and that's how it went. If you had the most seniority and you bid for a particular run, then it was yours. And he bid on my dad's run. And my dad had gotten to the point where he couldn't learn a new run. Um, they said later it was called hardening of the arteries in his brain, but it was very similar what you expect in Alzheimer's patients now. He wasn't to that point, but my mom would go with him, and it was in the downtown Los Angeles area, and by then there were buses, and you had to go so many blocks and turn this way and da 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 da, and she would go with him day after day after day, and he just couldn't do it. So they went to this man and begged him to give my dad back his run, and he wouldn't do it. So my dad had to retire. And then it just went sort of downhill from there. For a while, they would come up and visit us or do things. And then my mom was, I guess they needed more money, and so she was working in a small grocery store, and she would bring my dad with her, and he could stock shelves and do simple things. And then it just got really, really bad. He didn't talk much, and it was the same kind of thing. He'd try to leave the house, so she had locks where you could lock from the inside with a key, and that way he couldn't get out. But when he would be driving in the car, he's pulling the button up and down, he's taking his seatbelt off and on, and she was always worried that he was actually going to open the car door and fall out. He never did. So her doctor told her that she'd end up with a nervous breakdown if she didn't put him into some kind of facility. So he didn't really talk very much, and Dick and I went down to help do that. And Dick had him and my mother in my mom's car, and I followed in our vehicle. And my dad read signs all the way I guess that's when she changed facilities. That was it. She put him in the one, and that didn't work out too well. And so we went down to help her move him to a different one. And he read signs all the way down, and yet he hardly ever spoke. Just sat and smiled. Anyway, I think it was 1976. He had emphysema really badly from the smog because he never smoked. Even when we were Methodists, he didn't smoke. So I'm pretty sure it was 76 when he died. So he would have been just short of 76 because he was born in 1900.
When did your mom die?
She died in 93. She was 85. She turned 85 in July, and then she died in December the 12th. And that was a year after Dick died, because he died in 92.
How did she die?
She had a stroke. I'd had some errands. I had some friends who were giving me fruit, but I had to go pick it, and I asked her if she wanted to stay here and go with me, and she said she'd go with me. And the last place we stopped, it was sort of getting dark. I could hardly see the persimmons, but I was still picking. Anyway, got back in the car, and she said, well, I was just about ready to come out and get you. So we came home, and I fixed dinner, and she was sitting at the table eating when she put food on her fork, and then she raised it very slowly, and she hit her cheek with it. And I was watching her, and then she put it back down, and then she tried again, and then she sort of tried to fall out of the chair, and anyway. So I called 911, and they came and took her up to, I don't even remember what hospital now. And they said she'd had a massive stroke, and she didn't really talk very much after that, and seemed pretty much unaware of what was going on. And kept her in the hospital for, I guess, 5 days. Then he transferred her to a place on Fair Oaks, just south of Madison, and I don't think she lasted 2 weeks. So they had told me that she would undoubtedly never walk again, and it was massive, and there wasn't really a great deal I could do, and I prayed that she wouldn't live because I knew how she felt about convalescent facilities, because with my dad and then my grandmother was in one at the same time, and she was just run ragged going from one to another. So I really didn't want that for her.
Okay, let's talk about your grandparents. What were the names of your mother's parents?
Glenn Moreland Tremblay and Nellie Grace Peacock Tremblay. And then she became Nellie Grace Peacock Tremblay de Labout. She married a second time. My grandfather died probably in about early 40s, I think. I'd have to look him up. I don't know how old he was. And then my grandmother, of course, then lived with us for years, and not too happily. It was not a great association. That was then we joined the church, and also there all six of us joined the church at the same time. They couldn't find my dad's record, so he had to be rebaptized. And lo and behold, she got married again, which was she married my girlfriend's, my church girlfriend's grandfather. So I was maid of honor at my grandmother's wedding, which I thought was sort of neat.
What did you wear?
Oh, I don't even remember. Nothing spectacular. We just did it down at his daughter, my girlfriend's mother. We did just down at their house. The bishop, I think, married the two.
How old were you?
Well, I had to be over 13 because I was a member of the church, but not a great deal over that. Oh no, I had to have been in high school. I was in high school because during high school in this house we moved to up on North Alvarado, I shared a room with my grandmother and my older brother. I know I was in high school at the time. And then my brother went on his mission, and so then I shared the room with my grandmother and I.
And that was your mom's mom?
Yeah. Because I only met my dad's mom, and her name was Matilda. I think it was Matilda Erickson Pont, and his father's name was Frederick Pont. I don't now remember his middle name, and I never met him. I think they both lived up into their 80s or 90s. See, they had about 10 children, and so there were a lot of their family that was still there in the Galesburg area.
What did, let's go back to your mom's parents. What did they do for a living? Did they work?
Well, my grandfather did a lot of different things. In my early growing up, I remember he was a night watchman at General Foods downtown Los Angeles. They had a coffee roaster down there, and I guess they made Jell-O and stuff like that, and he was a night watchman, so he slept during the day. So anytime we made any noise in the yard, we always heard about it. Shut up out there! No, I really was scared to death of my grandfather. He had a big booming voice, and that was, of course, the days of radio, and the programs were like 15 minutes in the evening, and hardly anything was a half an hour. And he'd sit there at that table and I'd pound the table. I was such a shrinking violet. It was really bad, really bad.
What was it like sharing a room with your grandma?
It was I'll have to tell you, it was an oversized double garage is what it was. The man that we bought the house from had a Frito-Lay truck, and so this was a garage that was large enough to hold his Frito-Lay truck and a car. And we had friends down on Patton Street. In fact, the neighbor that I had to go call when my grandfather was dying, Mr. Kohler, and he came and remodeled it, so we had a small bath and this fairly large room. And it was interesting in that if my grandmother, I guess, had nightmares or something, and so she'd start moaning, "Grandma, wake up, wake up!" Anyway, and I know that, okay, we were on the side of a hill, and so this large garage was the street was up here. It was a very steep driveway, then the garage was here, and then the house was here, and so we overlooked this hillside. And so they put 5 windows at the back, 2 windows on near where my bed was, another window over here, and a door on the front is what they put into that garage. And so I was here, and I know my grandmother knew that if the full moon shone on me while I was in bed asleep, that I would go crazy. And I loved having the windows open and the curtains. You know, we had the roll down blinds. I had everything open. And in the morning, sometimes I would wake up and everything is closed. And I knew she'd gotten out of bed and pulled it down so that moon wasn't shining on me. I don't don't know if she really believed that, but I really think she did. She had a book that told what dreams meant. I still have it. It's more of a pamphlet. I still have it. It's really funny. It's funny. And people believe that kind of stuff. Oh well. But her nightmares, oh, that was chilling. I really hated that.
How long did you share a room?
Let's see, we moved up there, and I must have been about, I probably was about 12. I was in junior high, is that right for junior high, 12? And it was a two-bedroom house, and then you had to go down the back steps and then go into the garage. We called it the den, not the garage, the den. And so originally my two brothers were sharing that with my grandmother, and for the first time in my life I would actually have a real bedroom. I slept in a cot in the dining room. We never had enough room. My grandmother couldn't get my younger brother Walt out of bed, and so she complained enough, and so I lost my bedroom to my younger brother, which again was not too great. So I was in junior high then, and I was in high school when my grandmother got married the second time. So it was years. And with my brother also, but then finally he went on a mission. so, so that worked out. And then she got married, and I had this big room to myself, and nobody to tell me when I had to stop reading. I could read all night long if I wanted to, because my parents, once they went to bed, I mean, they weren't going to look out we had a little, they call it a breakfast nook, and they could look out and see if I had a light on because I was at a lower level. They never bothered to do that, so I didn't have to hide under the covers with a flashlight. And on Saturday mornings, the Metropolitan Opera would play from New York, and you'd just turn that on and open all the windows so all the neighbors get to share in the opera. That was fun.
Did we talk about your father's parents? Did you say
I
what
just
their
really,
names were?
I know so little about them. Nothing much to say. I would say that my mom's dad was actually born in Little Rock, Arkansas. He had three brothers, and he said when he was about 3, they came to the United States. They came to California. He didn't want anybody to know he was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. Well, you asked me what he did. He did a number of things. When my mom was a kid, he had I've forgotten what they would call it. He had a horse and a wagon, and he would move things for people, not like your old house of furniture, but he moved pianos a lot. And then he had guys that worked with him that were called swampers. Beats me. Anyway, my mother tells a little story about that, which I won't go into. This is family oriented. Anyway, I understand at one time he was farming sugar beets or something, only it got flooded out, and so they lost everything there. And it's at one time I was told that he had such a beautiful voice that someone wanted to pay his way to send him to Italy to study opera, but he decided he didn't want to do that. He looked very different than I do. My grandfather was black-haired and dark-complected. That's how come my younger brother was black-haired and dark-complected, was from my grandfather's side of the family. Because his brothers, see a picture of the 4 of them, and they're very handsome, but again, all black hair and dark complexion.
So, do you know where your father's parents lived, or they weren't around much?
Just in Galesburg. That's all I know.
And you don't know anything about what they did? Did you see them much, or
I saw his mother one time when I was probably about 15. She came out to visit. She came and I think brought 2 of her grandchildren from Galesburg, and then she stopped in Ogden, Utah, and brought 2 more of her grandchildren. That was my favorite aunt and uncle, was my dad's sister who lived in Ogden, Utah. Alice and David Liddell. That's one reason I have a son named David.
So you saw her a lot, her family?
I saw Alice and David. We went up there. It was our first, I guess, I don't remember my dad ever taking vacations. I mean, he might be home for a couple of days or something like that, but I don't remember us ever really going much of any place. And I spent a great deal of my summers with my great aunt and uncle, and so I went places with them, like to the desert. But this one year I was in high school, and it was the last day of school, and it was an old high school. It was the same high school my mom went to. They were still building it when she started there. And they had a basement area that was, the cafeteria was there, and there were some classrooms down there. And so it was the steps that came down, and then there was a landing, and then they came down the rest of the way, and they were concrete with, metal strip. And I fell down. Most of the way down the second flight going down, and everybody was pretty much gone. And again, people didn't have cars when I was in high school, except the teachers, some of them. And the state missionaries, the same ones that had introduced us to the church, lived about 2 blocks from my high school. And so she helped me hobble over there, and they drove me home. And my mom called the doctor, and then they went back home again. And so he said to bring her in. Again, no car, so we had to go down this steep hill. And by then, commuters are on the streetcars, and I had to stand all the way out to the doctor's office. When I got there, I'd sprained one ankle and strained the other one, and they didn't have ace bandages or stuff like that, so he taped them. This big, thick, wide cloth tape that sticks to your skin. And we were leaving the next morning for our first trip to Utah, first vacation that I ever remember my folks going on. And we were pass riders because I guess it was Union Pacific or whatever had a deal with the Pacific Electric, and so everything was gone out of the fridge, and we had to get a taxi and went down to Union Station in downtown LA, the famous Union Station. And we couldn't get on a train. They were having floods in the Midwest, and they were short of cars. We were a pass rider, therefore we couldn't get on. So, well, what do? Come down every day, and we'll try to get you on a train. So we got a taxi and went back home. Nothing to eat, and it was pretty miserable. Here I am with my ankles taped up and in pain because I didn't have crutches or anything like that. You just walked on them. And so we went down the next day, and they did get us actually on a train. And so all my cousins, Alice and David had 6 kids, and then there were the 3 of us. They went bike riding, and I'm sitting there on the couch. It didn't matter, I couldn't ride a bike anyway, but what was the thought? Anyway, that was a very interesting vacation. Utah smelled different. I really liked it. Just had a different smell there in Ogden. I really liked it. And the water ran down the streets for irrigation, and whew.
Let's see. There's a note here that it says rumble seat.
Oh.
Did you have a most enjoyable time spent with each grandparent?
Okay. My grandma and grandpa lived next door, of course, and the name of the street was Patton Street, and the houses were here. And then my grandparents had a long backyard, and then there was an alley at the back, and the garages were on the alley. And they had a garage, and they had this, I don't even know what kind of car it was, but it had a rumble seat. It was just a little roadster. 2 people sit in front and 2 people sit in the rumble seat. And only ours went down, and we called it a court, but what it was there was a duplex on our lot right behind our house, and there was a grassy area, and I understand that somebody burned our garage down. Rumors were that was my brother's, and I really don't know that for a fact. And I can't ask him now. I'll have to wait for years. But it could have been somebody else. I don't really know. Anyway, this was, as I remember, it was during the war, and so we had ration books, and gasoline was rationed, and you had either an A, a B, or a C card, and that depended on how much you could get. Well, my grandfather by then wasn't in any need for much gasoline. He didn't have a big job to go to or anything, and so every once in a while they would take us to the grocery store, and we'd get to ride in the rumble seat. I thought that was pretty neat. You're familiar with the rumble seat?
Is it face back?
It's the back is smooth, and there's a handle, and then you open it up, and they've got covering over them, only you're sitting right out here in the weather. Right. Oh, I thought that was really neat. The wind blowing through your hair. I don't even have a picture of that car either. We didn't own a camera.
Did you? They have a favorite story that you remember them telling your grandparents?
As
Any
I
kind of
say,
story?
I really stayed away from my grandpa. I feel badly about it, but it was in an era where children are seen and not heard. And my grandmother paid a little bit more attention to it, yes. But um, when she lived with us, it was really difficult. We're now all three of us are teenagers pretty much, and we're members of the church, and she doesn't, and she's down here in what we call the den, so she doesn't help with meals, she doesn't help with cleanup, she does her own laundry, um, she doesn't want to participate in family home evenings, she doesn't want to have family prayer with us, she just sort of isolated herself, and it wasn't a really great situation. In fact, when we would have prayer, family prayer, it's like, what do we do about grandma? In my own mind, I thought maybe she'd die. Isn't that awful? I mean, I didn't dislike her. I mean, she was my grandmother, and you have to have respect for that, regardless. But it wasn't until probably after she was married, I think I enjoyed her more than when she lived with us. Maybe that's a normal thing. I don't know. But yeah, she was she seemed more interesting. I had things to talk about. But when she was living with us, it was not easy. I don't recommend it. I don't want to live with any of my kids. I mean, I don't know what the future holds, but I prefer not to live with my kids. I mean, I like them now. I don't want to rock the boat.
You don't want to share a room with
Uh,
Laura
no.
or Julie?
No, I can't. I can't imagine. But we didn't have any choice. I mean, it's just the way it was. And okay.
Do you remember when any of your grandparents died?
I remember the day my grandfather died. That was traumatic because we didn't know what was going on, and I really don't even know what he died of. I know that he had. I don't even know if he smoked. I can't remember. I can't tie it down to if he did smoke. I don't think he smoked cigarettes. I vaguely remember he might have smoked a cigar, but I couldn't say for sure. But I know he had asthma, and he had difficulty breathing, and I assume that his death was something along those lines. Um, my the story is that when my brother Walt was born, see, I was only about 16 months old, but I had pneumonia, and my Aunt Margaret was still living next door with my grandparents, and she didn't want any screaming baby over there. So my grandmother's sister, Aunt Tessie, said that she would take me out to their house in Alhambra and take care of me. And I just remember spending all my vacation time when I started school. And I remember my Aunt Tessie taking me by the elementary school and saying, "Oh, isn't this a pretty little school? Wouldn't you like to go here?" And I'm 5. What do I know? And she said, "Do you want to stay here and go to school? Or do you want to go home and go to school with your brothers?" "Oh, I want to go home and go to school with my brothers." I don't know why they never would speak to me. It's the weirdest thing. You see them in the hall, it's just like they turn their head and look away. I guess you don't speak to girls. That must be it. Anyway, but all my vacation time I spent with my aunt and uncle, and then I remember stopping with my aunt at General Hospital, LA General Hospital, great big huge thing. She was having treatments. She had some kind of a sore or something. I don't even remember where, and she would go for treatments there, and then eventually they found that she had cancer that was so bad. It was inoperable, and they never let me see her again. They would never take me out to Alhambra to see her, and so she died, and I went to her funeral. And then my Uncle Bill sold the house and became pretty much of a recluse up in the White Mountains. Um, when you go up 395, there's Independence and Lone Pine and Bishop. They're in the White Mountains, which are east of 395. And I don't know that I ever saw him again. I know we wrote letters once in a while. and he sent me a postcard once in a while. And then he died, and my grandmother was the executor of his will. And my mom and I went up on the bus to, I think that was to Independence. And I don't remember what the deal was, whether we went there. I don't think it was to the funeral. I don't remember going to the funeral. But we went up there for some reason, and my grandmother and her second husband, Peter Daleabout, drove up there, and she sort of took charge, and we went out to where my Uncle Bill had a cabin. And he was a very, very nice painter. He was from Sweden, and he joined the Swedish Merchant Marine, so anything about ships, that was what he really liked. People would find a ship on a Christmas card. They used to make Christmas cards a little different than they do now. And they would send him a card, especially if it had a ship on it. Well, he had done all this painting. He had taken all his paintings, he'd paint them on wood rather than on canvas, and they'd be like maybe this size. In fact, I have one in that bedroom and one I've given to Eileen already. He nailed them to the walls about every inch, and about an inch or two down from the edge, it had nails, so we couldn't take any of them off the walls. I was really sorry, because I liked his painting. He painted Viking ships and all kinds of ships, and he had some carvings. He had a carving about this long of the Queen Mary.
So how were you related to him?
He was the wife of my great aunt, my grandmother's sister, and he was her husband. His name was John William Alexanderson when he came to the United States, and then he dropped the son, so he was John William Alexander. Worked for the Edison Company out in Alhambra.
So who were the relatives of your grandmother? Like, do you remember of any of her siblings?
That was the one to be my Aunt Tessie,
Okay.
and that's all. There was just the two of them.
And then
she had an aunt or a great aunt, and I knew her. That was Aunt Annie, and she had a husband, Tom Chapin. She's the one that was engaged for, I don't know, 5-10 years, and before they had a chance to get married, he was killed in a buggy accident. So then she met Tom Chapin, I guess, and they were engaged for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or something like that, and they finally got married. They only had one child, and that was my cousin Hazel Marie.
And your grandfather, who were the relatives of
He
your
had
grandfather?
the three brothers, John and Lawrence. Right now I can't remember the other one. And they were all married, and I guess they had some children, but for whatever reason, they all lived in the greater Los Angeles area, as far as I know. I don't remember spending any time with them, or even seeing them more than once or twice. I don't know whether there were bad feelings, I really don't know, but we had very little to do with my grandfather's brothers. And then, of course, my mother has a sister, my Aunt Margaret, and she married Leonard Hannon, and then they had 2 children. And we would see them they lived in El Monte, and see, without a car, that was, might as well be to the moon. And so we didn't see them too frequently. And I have a picture of me, I must have been about 10 or 11, and my cousin Lorene was probably about 2. So there's that much difference. And then her brother, we always called him Buster, because he's a junior, but now he prefers to be called Lenny. Okay. We would see them infrequently. Maybe when we were getting together 4th of July at my Aunt Tessie's, we would see them for that. But then after my aunt died and my uncle moved away, we just, I don't know, you wouldn't call us a really close-knit family. Because those were, let's see, Aunt Margaret and Uncle Leonard and my grandparents next door, and that's about it.
So
and then
then
when we'd go to Utah.
That was pretty much it on your dad's side.
I understand that a couple of his sisters did come out to California from time to time, and then I saw some of them when my dad died. They came out for the funeral. they're really, my mom used to write to them, and in fact, I don't even know who's left in the family now. I haven't corresponded with anybody in Galesburg. I just didn't know them, and so I'm a poor correspondent anyway. So I've not kept up with any of them. Though I do have cousins. I just happened to think. So your mom mentioned just the other day she saw one of her cousins, which would be that was the Stone Kings. Is that their name? Stone King.
Yeah.
I can't think of the other one. Yeah, there are some in the area. In fact, one of them came over and visited when my mom was in the convalescent facility. But right now, I can't remember his name. Oh, it was. Let's see, Jackie. It was Jack Stone King, I think, because we called him Jackie when he came out to California from Galesburg with my grandmother from Galesburg.
What do you remember about your grandparents' children besides your parents?
Well, that'd be my Aunt Margaret. The most vivid memory I have of her is when my dad died and we were in Forest Lawn Cemetery. She and her family, my Uncle Leonard and my Aunt Margaret and their two children joined the church, actually. And that was before the LA Temple was completed. And I think perhaps they might not have been paying their tithing at that time or whatever. But when you had to go to the bishop to get an invitation to go to the dedication of the LA Temple, he wouldn't give them one. And so that ended their church affiliation, except Lorraine, their daughter, who kept, in fact, I've been to the temple for each of her children's being married in the temple. She had invited my mom, and I took her down for both of those. I don't even know. See, I don't keep track of anybody. I'm terrible, just terrible, because I don't know their names, and I haven't talked to Lorraine in many years.
What do you remember about your great-grandparents, or what do you remember hearing about them? Did you ever meet them?
No, let's see, that would have been my grandmother's parents, and my grandfather's parents would have been back in, well, I don't know where they would have been, but no, I'm trying to think if it was my mother that said her mother's mother lived with them for a while and would fall and burn herself on the stove or something. Other than that, no, I never met any of them. I guess we didn't. I think back, I should have asked a lot of questions. How come my mother's middle name is Bernice? Who did they ever know whose name was Bernice? Or Elizabeth with my aunt? I don't know. How come you name? Well, my dad had a brother, Walter, so I guess that's how come they named Glenn after my grandfather, and then they named Walter, I guess, after my dad's brother. But other than that, there's so many questions I'd like to know the answers to, and I never bothered to ask. It didn't seem important. Too bad.
We're almost finished with the grandparents section.
Okay, all right.
From what part of the world did your family emigrate?
Well, that's what your mother would like to know on some of them. Okay, I know on my dad's side, we're pretty much all from Sweden. And then on my grandfather's side, we haven't gone back, but I think there are some from England, and I think we have some from Ireland. And obviously there's got to be somebody from France, because I've been told that's my grandfather and his three brothers. That's the French side. But
Were there any stories about your family crossing, or when they first came to this country?
Okay, we've got the one story. This would be my grandmother's people, I think. All I know about my dad's people they came from Sweden. But my grandmother, Some of them got to Australia, and then they immigrated from Australia to California. And supposedly my cousin Lenny has the ship's log for when they did this. And I'm sorry, with family history, I just very poor. But your mom's working on it.
Okay. Well, I'll just skip the rest of those then, because if you don't know any of that much about it, we probably already have those
sure
kind of things. Like, oh, do we have any relatives in foreign countries that you're aware of? Or
no, I'm sure there must be. Everybody didn't immigrate to the United States, so I'm sure there must be some relatives someplace.
or any famous relatives took part in a well-known historical event?
Not that anybody ever told me.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Well, I think this is a good time to stop.
Okay. My wallet be? Where would it be? And so when I got home, it was sitting on my wallet out. Can you see that my glasses are dirty?
No, it's not that good of a camera. Well, it is, but I don't think you would.
I rented 3 movies, DVDs yesterday.
Do you want those pillows there?
Not particularly.
Okay.
They're distracting.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we don't want anything to distract from me.
Yes. Yeah, I think that looks good. Okay.
And you want me to look at the camera, not at you?
You can look at me.
Okay. I didn't brush my teeth or anything.
Let me get a zoom in on that. Okay, let me just... I'm always freaked out that it's not gonna be recording.
Yeah, you can move that chair to the other side if you wanted to.
No, fine.
Okay.
Well, maybe I should... Well, I don't know. Because I know that it's going to be running out, but I think it'll signal probably when the tape runs out.
Oh, that would be good.
And it doesn't have the light on? No light.
I don't see it.
Must not be working. I think that's it right there. Huh.
Is it running now?
Yeah, it's on.
Ah!
It's on.
Supposed to say testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, action. Okay, today is August 10th, 11th.
Today's Thursday, the 11th, because the big sale at Joe's is on the 13th.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, it's August 11th, 2005, and this is the second interview.
Okay.
And we're going to be talking about your childhood. So let's start with the type of house that you lived in as a child.
I think it would probably be classified as a bungalow. It was, I didn't know at the time, but it had what was called a hip roof. The roof came down flat because we used to throw balls up on it and have them roll off, and we'd run and catch them. Living room and dining room with a porch across the front, 2 bedrooms, and then a long kitchen and a bath and a laundry room screened porch type thing. It was on we thought the lot was big, but going back and looking at it 25 years later, it was pretty small. Oh, actually, no, that would have been closer to 50 years later. It was pretty small. And we had a duplex behind our property, and then we had a backyard behind that. There used to be a freestanding garage back there. There was an alley at the back of the house, and it burned down, and there were some rumors it was my brothers that burned it down, but I really don't know that for a fact.
How big was the lot? Do you know? Or the house?
I don't think it's more than 50 feet across the front, and probably more than double that from the front, from our street, Patton Street, to the back alley. And then my grandmother lived next door. Her house is very much different. It had been moved in from Hollywood, and it's the kind of now that at one time was popular where the shingles are on the front shingled across the front because it didn't have shingles on the roof. That was 329 Patton Street, and we were 335 Patton Street.
How long did you live in that house?
I think it was about between 11 and 12 when we sold. We sold actually both those houses, and my grandfather died in that house at 329. We came home from school, and my grandmother was yelling a little bit and told us to go next door and get the neighbor on the other side. My parents were both at work. And so we went over and got Mr. Kohler, and we were told to sit in the living room. And I assume he wasn't dead then, but he died shortly after we got home from school. And so she, after he was buried in Forest Lawn, which is, the big place that everybody got buried in, it seemed like, she, after a while, decided she didn't want to live by herself, so we moved next door with her. She had a 2-bedroom house, and there were 5 of us. So my mom and dad had the downstairs bedroom, which had been my grandfather's bedroom, and my grandmother had the upstairs bedroom, which was how they arranged it. And my 2 brothers shared that room with her, and I had a cot in the dining room, which is what I had at home. And after a while, my mom was sick a lot, and still both my parents were working, and we rented our house is what we did. And then my mom decided we couldn't do that any longer, so we asked the renters to move, and we moved back home. And then my grandmother announced she couldn't live in that house anymore, so we sold both the houses and moved to a house that had an oversized double garage, which was really quite large for that time. And it was on the side of a hill, and this Mr. Kohler, who lived next door to my grandparents, he came and remodeled the garage and made it into a room with a small bathroom. And so we moved up there, and I was going to have the house only had 2 bedrooms, and I was finally going to get my own bedroom. And my 2 brothers shared this huge room with my grandmother, and after the 3rd morning that my grandmother couldn't get my younger brother Walter up in the morning, she announced that she wasn't, I can't do this. So I moved up until I was in high school, and when my older brother went on a mission, I shared a large bedroom with my older brother and my grandmother.
So it wasn't until you were in high school that you had your own room?
My brother went on a mission, and then my grandmother remarried. Okay. I was maid of honor at my grandmother's wedding. Anyway, then I had my own room, which was not connected to the house. There was a common wall, but the garage was at this level and the house was at this level, so you had to go down the back stairs and into my room, which was very nice. I could read until the wee hours. I didn't have to have a flashlight under the covers and listen to anything I wanted on the radio. I didn't have a TV. But that was nice. But I liked our house on Patton Street. It was a nice house, even if I did sleep in the dining room.
Where did you have your clothes? And
I didn't see. I can't even remember. They must have been in my brother's room. And my mother was always loved to move furniture. My dad would never know when he came home where the furniture was in the room and then she would even move bedrooms. There were the 2 rooms which were about equal in size. And so she decided she wanted to be in the back bedroom, and so they'd move all the furniture, and my brothers would be in the front bedroom, and my mom and dad would be in the back bedroom. And after I got married, I never moved furniture. Dick was the one who decided when furniture was to be moved. I guess I had enough of it when I was a kid.
Probably. Do you remember what it was like moving from the one house to the other?
To moving in with my grandmother? Or moving when we sold the houses and moved up on the hill?
Sold the house.
No, it's really terrible. There are a lot of things they're gone.
You don't remember?
I don't remember. I don't know whether we had people help us or... Because our street was pretty much only about 1 or 2 blocks long, and then there was a major street at one end, and there was more Patton Street above this major street, Temple Street, but we didn't know anybody up there. But we were a fairly close-knit neighborhood. I mean, we knew everybody, but see, nobody had cars. Almost no one of our neighbors had cars, so I don't know how we moved. Whether we hired a moving company or...
How far away from each other were the two homes?
Not within walking distance. Would have gone out Glendale Boulevard 5 to 10 miles, I guess. See, but it's all built up, so it's, you know, you didn't know when you were in one community and got to the next.
Right.
But it was up a really steep hill, and I don't have a single memory. I remember looking at the house when it was empty, because it had, you came in and there was a living room, and then again there were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom in between them, and then you came into a very small kitchen, and then what they called a breakfast nook, which was actually higher than ground level, and you could see all the way to the Los Angeles City Hall. You could see the City Hall. It only looked about this tall, but you could see downtown Los Angeles, so we weren't all that far away. But I remember the wallpaper in that breakfast nook, because there were windows on the one side and a window here, and then there was a door to the outside. This jungle wallpaper, just, it was creepy. And when we started taking that off, there were about 5 or 6 layers of wallpaper, all different, but all just about as hideous as those huge leaved creeping vines. So I don't even remember, I think we painted the wall then, we didn't even put wallpaper in. But no, I don't remember a thing how we got there. We just did.
How was your home heated?
We had a gas furnace up on our house on North Alvarado, because I remember the big grate in the floor right outside the 1 bedroom. How we heated the den, we called it the den. I don't have a clue. I don't remember how we heated the den. Of course, Los Angeles is not a huge problem. And we had a lot of windows in it, 5 windows that looked out down the hillside, and 2 windows looking out this way and 1 window looking out that way. But he took the big, huge garage door off. The guy used to run a Frito-Lay truck, and so that's what he used to bark in there. Because it was a steep, the driveway was about like this.
Did you have a way to cool off the house?
Open the windows.
Any fans?
That was long before anybody had air conditioning in their homes. Especially in Los Angeles, it was no big deal. You might have hot weather and maybe last for a couple of days, and then it was cooler again, so it wasn't a big problem. Yeah, open the windows, the breeze blow through.
So I guess you didn't have to cut wood or anything like that.
Did
you have a fireplace?
Never had none of. Let's see, my grandmother's house actually had a fireplace, but of course they never used it. That's why we hung our stockings when we were on Patton Street. We hung them at my grandmother's house because she had a chimney, and we didn't have a fireplace, so Santa Claus always had to come there. But no, at that house up there was just, as I say, there was no way to have the furnace in the house heat the den, because again, it was at a different level. I don't remember any little portable electric heaters or anything.
What about candles or lamps? Or
No, we never used candles. My mother used to burn incense, though. We always thought, I think about that now. My mom loved to burn incense. We have to realize that was a long time ago, and sandalwood was her favorite. Yeah. I got to the point I loved sandalwood, and that was when we were little kids. She had this special little thing, and they were little triangular things, and
the cones.
Yeah.
What kind of stove did you cook on?
Let's see. Gas down on Patton Street. My grandmother next door had a gas stove. We had a gas refrigerator on Patton Street. My grandmother had an ice box. The iceman would come periodically with a big thing, and we'd beg for chunks of ice, and that was the big thing. Ooh, look, I got a piece of ice. Because in my grandmother, she didn't make ice or anything like that. You were lucky to get things cold with a block of ice, a 50-pound block of ice.
So you never used ice for drinking or?
We did at our house, but never at my grandmother's.
Just to keep things.
We used to make a big pitcher of iced tea in the summertime. Really liked iced tea. It was good. Never particularly cared for coffee. We used to eat breakfast at my grandmother's before we'd go to church on Sundays. My grandparents didn't go to church, but we belonged to the Methodist church, and we'd get you'd get this much coffee in the cup, and then you'd put in about this much milk, and I never particularly cared for it. And we never drank hot tea, but we drank iced tea in the summer.
Where did you store your food? Did you have a cellar or?
Well, we had a cellar at that house, but us as kids, we weren't allowed to go in it because there were black widow spiders and stuff like that. And there were some things stored there, but nothing that you used all the time because it was locked and never went in it. So we had some cupboards. The kitchen there on Patton Street was nice. It had a built-in, what would you call it? A built-in
Pantry?
No, more like cupboards across, cupboards down, and then a shelf, and then cupboards below, like a, what would they call it? A bureau? No, I wouldn't call it that. Whatever. Anyway, there were a lot of cupboards in that house. Something's happening.
No, I just need to check it.
Okay.
Make sure it's not gonna stop.
Okay. And then we had other cupboards by the sink. We had the kitchen was almost as wide as the house was. Because you've got 2 bedrooms and your living room with a separate dining room. And then the kitchen went almost all the way across the back except for a small bathroom. So it was big. We had a lot of cupboards there. And it was a big old gas stove.
Okay. Okay, so you had, it says, where did your family get water? I'm guessing you had water in your house.
Yes, we had. Wasn't quite
was
that
it
primitive.
plentiful? What methods were used to conserve water?
We had sewers and the whole bit. Then we had an old-fashioned.
You never know.
Well, we had an old-fashioned toilet. The toilet sits there, and then you have this great big huge wooden box up above it. So when you pulled the handle, the water came down and flushed things out.
Well, there you go.
And we had an old bathtub that sat up on legs, and so when the mice ran across, they'd be sitting on the toilet and they'd run under the bathtub, and you'd think, ah!
Did you have mice in the house a lot?
Mice and cockroaches, yeah, that was just par for the course.
Did you ever have any cats or anything like that?
There were a couple of stray cats that would come around once in a while, but we really didn't have dogs or cats. My grandfather had 2 dogs next door, but they were penned up in a pen, and only he was allowed to let them out and play with them. We were not encouraged to have anything to do with his dogs, which I thought was pretty pitiful. But my Aunt Tessie had a dog, and when I spent time out there, it was a Boston Bull Terrier, and I was so happy that day I could actually pick it up. I thought that was really great. His name was Beans, because he was a Boston Bull Terrier. His name was Beans.
Okay, so you were the youngest?
No, I'm in the middle.
The middle.
Yeah.
And what, did you have any chores as a child or work that you had to do?
Yes. I was rather resentful because my folks at that time when we were in elementary school were both working. My mom worked for Enneman and Son, which was a jeweler manufacturer, and my dad, of course, drove streetcars for Pacific Electric. So when we came home from school, my parents weren't there, and the 3 of us all had chores. We didn't have any carpeting in the house. It was linoleum floor. So my brothers, they got to use the dust mop, and that's what they did, and they're finished. I'd always clean the kitchen. Always clean the kitchen and the bathroom, which as I say, I was a little resentful of that. And usually it was my chore to start dinner. So that's why I learned to cook at a fairly early age, because it was sort of out of necessity. When we came home from school, we first had to check in with my grandmother, let her know we're there. Then we had to go to our house and do our chores. And then there was a lot of the time where my brother Glenn was old enough, he sold newspapers on the corner of Glendale Boulevard and Temple Street, which was very, very busy. Yellow cars were on Temple Street, red cars were on that, and they used to have what they call a safety zone. You're probably totally unfamiliar with this, but there's 2 lanes of traffic, and then you have 2 rails for the streetcars, one going one way and one going the other way. And it would be marked on the pavement out there in the street, probably about this wide, and maybe almost the length of a streetcar. And so when you wanted to get on the streetcar, you would be there in the safety zone with traffic going by like crazy to get on the streetcar. Well, they sold newspapers on those corners, and they either were on the sidewalk or they'd be in the safety zone. And I remember there was one time my brother Walt went over with Glenn to help him, and they evidently made a huge mess, and there were newspapers every place, so they had to go back over and pick up all the newspapers. But I wasn't involved in that. That was not a girl's profession, selling newspapers.
How did you, or how did you learn how to cook? Who taught you? And how old were you?
I probably was learning to make cakes at about 7 or 8, and then I graduated to other things. But yeah, my mom taught me.
Was that the first thing you learned how to do, was baking?
Yeah. My dad's favorite was called a hot melt cake, and I have the recipe, though I don't think I've made one. It's a fairly heavy cake. It's not real light, but we didn't have cake mixes, so everything was made from scratch. And I remember my grandmother very seldom ever came over to our house, and she had come over, and I guess we were eating dinner, so I offered her a piece of my cake, and how is it? And I should have learned then, because I had the same thing with my husband when I'd have my hair done and he didn't say anything. Oh, don't you like my hair? And usually he didn't. So I should have learned, because my grandmother said, oh, it doesn't have enough salt in it. And I just was, somebody stuck a pin in my balloon. I just was so deflated. But then she didn't come over very often, so I didn't, got over it. But we used to make cookies, and we were watching, Alex was over and we were watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and they asked the question, 18, la da da, whatever, what was manufactured as a butter substitute. And so there were 4 answers there, and I told him it was margarine. I don't know if he's even heard of margarine. Anyway, I told him, I remember during World War II when they introduced margarine, and it wasn't colored yellow, and it came in a package like butter, except it's white. And I mean, it was so nasty. It was Nuco. That was, I think, the first one that I remember. The butter lobby wouldn't allow them to color it yellow because they didn't want competition with butter, but butter was rationed. And so we couldn't always get butter. So if you wanted something on your potatoes or on your bread, you had no choice but to go get margarine. So finally, I guess the margarine people got loud enough about it that the margarine would come in a 1-pound plastic bag, sort of, that was sealed all the way around, and in it was a little thing, like a little pill that had the yellow coloring in it. So what you would do is you would break that, and then you would squeeze for about, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes to get the yellow mixed all in, so that you now had some nasty stuff that looked yellow. It was really funny, really funny.
Let's see. What other kinds of things do you remember cooking?
Spaghetti. We ate a lot of spaghetti. We ate mainly things with hamburger. We were not very high on the economic scale, and so we ate things that were pretty inexpensive, and so we had a lot of things with hamburger. And of course, we did have a turkey at Christmas, and I remember the special dishes that we only used at Thanksgiving or Christmas time. And my brother Walt was rather a picky eater, and I always felt my mom, we cooked to please my younger brother. My dad would eat anything. Anything you put in front of him, he would eat it. But Walt was a different story. So he ate hamburger and meatloaf and you name it, and it had hamburger in it.
What was your favorite thing to make?
Oh, I loved making cakes. I really did. Not as fond of them now. I want cookies or something else. Yeah, I remember. I never made a pie. My mom never made pie. We didn't really eat pie. It wasn't until long after I was married that I learned how to make a pie. And I don't know, maybe they weren't as popular then. I really don't know. But I enjoyed cooking. I thought that was a lot of fun.
When did you learn how to sew? And do you know, crochet, knit, embroider?
My mother and my grandmother both were excellent crocheters. My mom we had doilies on everything. That was what you did. And, with this very fine thread. My mother used to would buy a handkerchief, and then she would crochet edgings with stuff that was almost as fine as a sewing machine thread. And she would do that. And I never learned because both my mother and my grandmother are left-handed. And so we gave up even trying to teach me. I was in high school before I learned to knit. Neither of them knitted, and I decided I wanted to knit, so I went out and I bought an instruction book and needles and yarn, and I taught myself how to knit. But I think I was in high school before I did that.
So did you ever learn to crochet then?
I can do some basic crocheting. Yeah, I had to teach myself. I now, because of the arthritis in my thumb area, I find the movement of crocheting is very irritating. So I make the leopard bandages for the humanitarian, but I knit them because I find knitting is very easy on my hands, whereas crocheting's not. So I've given up crocheting. Oh, you ask about sewing. My grandmother, I guess when she was younger and before she married, was a seamstress, and they did everything by hand then. And she used to do, these little fine tucks and blouses and all this kind of stuff. But I don't think she ever taught my mother how to sew. So my mom and I'm trying to think whether it was junior high or high school, we finally went out and bought a pattern and bought the fabric, and between the two of us, we did it. We had an old treadle machine, didn't even have an electric one. And the problem was, at that time, they were putting plackets in the side with a zipper. That way you could get the waist in smaller. And also there were no directions on patterns. When you would open it up, the pieces were all separate, and they were totally blank, but they had holes of different sizes, and that meant different things. It was really crazy. I don't know how anybody really learned
That's
how
what
to
I'm
sew.
thinking. How did anybody sew anything?
It was very tough. It really was. And one of the best things the manufacturer ever did was to start putting instructions on the pattern itself, because when you open up one of those and it's looking for the holes, that means it's on the fold, and it was terrible. Really
what was
terrible.
the pattern that you?
Well, this one, it was a dress. It had a waist and a top and sleeves. And then again, to make it so that it's narrow at the waist, it had this zipper in the side. Well, neither my mother or I knew how to put in zippers, so we didn't. We just made the waist and the top where it fit the waist bigger, so that it goes on over your head. Not very great. Not very great. So we really didn't. But afterwards, after all of us had left home, my mom went to took all kinds of sewing classes and got really very, very proficient in sewing. But I sort of, on your own, you're making school clothes. Things got simpler. It was easier to read patterns, and fabrics got nicer. And I remember making, it would have been Susan and Carolyn, jumpers out of a fabric called Trigger, which is a very hard woven, I don't know if it's 100% cotton or whether it has some poly or dacron or something in it. It wears like iron, and they were sort of a fairly large. One of them was green and white check, and the other one was orange and white check. I think they hated those dresses, but they wouldn't wear out. It just lasted, and they wore them. I think one of them, we have a school picture with them wearing the one of them.
All right.
So I just, it was sort of self-taught, because junior high, you had to take sewing in 7th grade. Junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And you had to take sewing the first semester, and you made an apron and a pot holder and a dorky little thing that you put around your head, because the following semester you had to take foods. And so you had to wear this apron, use this pot holder, and tie this thing around. It's supposed to keep your hair from falling in the food.
Like a bandana
or
something?
Well, it was like, it would come out, let's see, it was here across the bottom, then it would come down and sort of come up like that, and had ties on it. And it would, I have to realize this was the olden days. They don't do things like that now. In fact, I think it was really great, because it really made almost every girl who went into the 7th grade learn how to sew on a machine. And what they would have us do, you'd get notebook paper, and you wouldn't thread the machine, and you would have to sit there. And these were actually electric machines. Ours at home was still a treadle. You would have to stitch down these straight lines, following the lines on the notebook paper. Some of the girls, I'm not sure they got much beyond sewing notebook paper. Anyway, it was funny. The aprons were so ugly. But then there were those who really were expert, and they went on to other things. And they made us, I remember the one girl made a gathered skirt, because gathered skirts were what you made. and actually went into several other things. I was lucky to get the apron, the pot holder, and the cap. I guess they called it a cap. I don't know. I did get those finished, and then cooking the next semester, which was such a waste. I mean, it was spent a lot of time, and this is a measuring cup, and
Yeah,
it
I
was
remember taking a class like that.
Yeah, it was.
And
it was
some people in the class were just, they're accidentally getting soap in the food and, stuff like that.
Well, I remember we fried bacon and eggs one time, and there was mold on the bacon, and it was horrible. I just hated that.
Yeah, really basic recipes that it's for people that have never ever cooked.
Yeah. Well, I was a dunce in the sewing class, but I bored to tears in the cooking class.
Actually, I think I remember making baked Alaska in
really?
the class, but it's not that big of a deal.
No,
it's really not.
No. I just as soon have my ice cream cold with
Yeah.
chocolate sauce on it. Forget that.
I mean, we had like a brownie mix that we made, and then we had to make the
meringue.
Yeah, the meringue for the outside. It was not a big deal.
No, I'd never asked for baked Alaska. I have made them for, a family dinner or something like that, but what a waste.
That was towards the end of the class.
Yeah. That was more expert things.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, did you ever do ironing or that sort of thing? Any other chores that you did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had an iron. You had to heat it up and then iron real quick before it cooled down. And I think that must have left a lasting impression, because when I was making clothes for the kids, and then we had what we call the ironing box, because so many of the fabrics then were not wash and wear. They had to be ironed every time.